house in Baltimore. Get up on the baseball trading deadline and the confluence of the NFL training camps beginning. It's always fun when I can bring some guests on to talk a little baseball and a little football. The Texas Rangers of Arlington are here in Baltimore all week long, camped out, watching the demise of the Orioles and the trades that may be coming, may not be coming, of course, all pending a physical from Mr. Angelos. This guy covers a little baseball, but a lot of football deep in the heart of Texas. Longtime, legendary NFL writer at the Dallas Morning News. You can hear him here at WNST every Sunday, along with Ron Borges and our pal Clark Judge and the Talk of Fame Network. We welcome one of our defending champions, Rick Goose Goslin, back on from a sweltering hot Texas in advance of Cowboys and Rangers. But Goose, they're going to send you to Canton, Ohio here soon, right? So you got your Talk of Fame and Hall of Fame and all that good stuff. Always a pleasure to have you on, man. Happy summer to you, Goose.
Baltimore is one of my favorite towns. Good to be on.
Well, the Rangers are here, and we're going to start with some baseball. I'll get the football, we'll get the Cowboys, we'll get the Hall of Fame and Talk of Fame. But from the baseball perspective, this is a weird time for Orioles fans because they need to sell off. They should sell off. I don't know if they're going to sell Machado off. I don't believe they will. I think they should, or at least should consider it. But meanwhile, the Rangers are sort of one of those consistent little middling, engines that right now believe that they're in this thing. And, we'll see when it's all said and done. But I think the Rangers are buyers this week, and I think if you go into October with Cole Hamels and Yu Darvish, you got a chance, right?
Yeah, if the Aces pitch like aces, and they haven't been doing that for the bulk of this season. They didn't do it in the playoffs last year. They need these guys to be quality starters, 7, 8, even 9 innings, and win games. And they've had a tough time winning games. It's funny that the Orioles are 9 back and they're sellers. The Rangers are 16.5 back and they think they're in it.
That's baseball. That's summer. You know what that really is the second wild card, though, right? I mean, they did it to stimulate interest. They did it to stimulate this conundrum, this stuck in the middle for so many franchises, because there will be some franchises that sell off here that may have gotten back in, and there's certainly going to be some teams that go further in, and the Orioles did this with Gerardo Parra and the Feldmans and some of these crazy deals they've made at the deadline. I mean, I think the hardest thing for any person to do, let alone an organization, is to be very honest in a self-evaluation. Do you think the Rangers can win the World Series this year? That would be the question I would ask. And, they got a lot of boppers, and they need some more pitching. But 2 years ago, they made the deal of all deals, and they certainly have a guy in John Daniels that is decorated and very well thought of to be the leader of this strategy there, right?
But they don't have a bullpen. They don't have a closer. They've already blown. They lead the league in blown saves. They've tried 3 different guys as their closer. It's tough to say this team can go all the way if they can't finish games. They lost another game yesterday in 9th inning the other day to the Royals. They don't have a shutdown bullpen. Even if they get 7, 8 strong innings from Hamels and Darvish, there's no guarantee that their bullpen can close those games out. So I doubt that they're going to be sellers. I think they will try to buy, but they are in desperate need of some relief help, and I'm not sure where that's going to come because everybody seems to be having relief problems this season.
Goose, you were writing a column for a long time at the Dallas Morning News on football, but then on baseball. And 2 years ago, the deal for Cole Hamels, I don't want to say it shook baseball, but it was very out of character, right? I mean, taking on all this money in a year when it looked like they were closing shop, it turned out to make John Daniels look sort of brilliant. And, I would say 2 years later, I look up and say the Orioles completely suck right now. The Orioles should have been one of the teams dealing in for a Cole Hamels at that point, because that's what they need. That's what they lack. That's what they've never been able to sign on the open market when they've had that opportunity with a Messina and Eric Bedard. And now they have this transitional superstar in Manny Machado that they're sort of stuck in the middle. They're probably not going to give him $300 million in 18 months. But dealing in to take on salary and giving up young players, giving up might-be's for is, that's not as bad a strategy as you think, even though it comes with a $25 million a year arm, right?
No, but then there's, on the flip side, a trade going the other way is what made the Rangers contenders in the first place. They had Mark Teixeira and he was not going to re-sign. They traded him to Atlanta, and they got the shortstop Elvis Andrus. They got Matt Harrison, who pitched Game 7 of World Series for them. They got Neftali Feliz, who was their closer for a number of years. That trade, trading away a proven commodity for prospects, put the Rangers on the board. Now, they thought they could close the deal when they traded prospects to get Cole Hamels, and they were close. You can't argue with the success. And if Hamels had pitched like he had in Philadelphia, this team may have been a World Series team since then. But both he and Darvish have struggled, especially this season.
Well, and physical struggles. I mean, more so than just. I mean, look, the Orioles. These guys keep making the turns every 5 days and are pitching to ERAs of 7 and 8. In Texas, it was different. It was really injury related, and I think everyone is wondering whether Darvish would ever be the same. And you look at the record, and it doesn't speak to much. But you dig a little deeper. He's been pretty good, man.
He's got no run support this year. And that's one of the issues. And this has a team. This is a team that can hit. It's got long ball potential. And there are games when they really pile up the runs, but they have just not given Darvish that support. And that's one of the reasons he's got that losing record. But if they put him on the open market tomorrow, they'd be teams lining up 20 deep to get him.
Well, and I guess for the lineup, it's similar to the Orioles in that it's beer league softball, right, Goose? I mean, they're going to have 8 guys that are going to hit 20 home runs, but they're also going to have 12 guys that are going to strike out 100 times.
Yeah, and that's Joey Gallo is a classic case. I mean, he's hitting under 200, but every time he's up, he's capable of hitting a tape-measure home run. And he's the young guy. He was the guy they held on to in the previous 2 years. People wanted Gallo. They didn't trade him.
Boy, he is Dave Kingman, isn't he, right? I mean, like, when you look at a stat line, there's nothing quite like a guy, under Mendoza, who's had 250 at-bats and has struck out 113 times. It's crazy.
I tell you, when he connects, though, the ball goes a long way. I was in New York when Kingman was there. In fact, Kingman lived in my building when I was in New York.
He didn't send you a rat, right? Was it the rat from your building or no?
No,
just checking.
It might have been. But, yeah, he's Dave Kingman revisited. When he hits them, they're tape measure shots, but he just doesn't always hit them.
What do you love about the Rangers, Goose?
Well, I love the ballpark, which they're going to replace. They're a fun team to watch. Beltre, you can see Adrian Beltre. He has a lot of fun playing baseball. Elvis Andrus has a lot of fun playing baseball. They got a lot of guys that love playing baseball, and if they had pitching, this would be a great team to cover. They'd be dynamic. They're a bunch of good guys at the clubhouse. Just so they can't. This is the 3rd straight year they've changed closers early in the season. I think it's 3 straight Mays. They went into a season with a closer and then moved on. So they just haven't figured out this bullpen thing. And that's why they haven't been back to the World Series. If they had a guy that could slam the door and close out games, they'd be right in it with Houston. But they can't. They have not. They've blown. I think they've blown 15 games.
One of our favorites, Rick Goslin, joining us here, formerly of the Dallas Morning News, full-time, still writing columns there, but always with us on Sundays at talkoffamenetwork.com, and you can hear that here each and every Sunday right around lunchtime. You can also follow him out on Twitter at Rick Goslin9, the number 9, and he will be following all things NFL and Hall of Fame voting to Canton in a couple of weeks. I guess here's where the transition comes, Goose. How many years have you been in Dallas?
It's my 28th year.
28 years in Dallas. We're here in Baltimore, and we have our thing with Pittsburgh. Cleveland has its thing with us. We obviously have a thing with D.C. to some degree, although we sort of share the Capitals and the Wizards. That Dallas-Houston thing, from afar, no one here smells it, feels it, sees it. Maybe a little bit in the NBA over the years. Certainly from a football perspective, Dallas has owned it. And as a community, Houston has always had a little bit of a chip on its shoulder. Even though it's a bigger metropolis, Dallas has always sort of had the parades and the stars and the fun and the Cowboys and bigger and better and all that stuff. This Astros-Rangers thing never existed for 40 years, right? Now, over the last 5 years, they've tried to make this thing work. Nothing makes a rivalry work like one team kicking the other team's ass, right? I mean, this Astros summer is sort of legendary over there, and I don't think the Rangers just want to, let this get by and let the Astros go and play in October while they're watching on the outside. There's a real rivalry building between not just the cities, which was always sort of there, but from a baseball perspective, this has been good for both of these franchises, I think, in the end.
Yeah, I think that's why they moved the Astros from the National League to the American League. The Rangers and the Astros were teams without rivals. And now they're in the same league. They're playing, 14, 15 times a year. And until recently, the Astros could not beat the Rangers. The Rangers, I think, won 15 in a row at one point. Now the table's turned. The Astros have all the young stars. They've got pitching. They've got hitting. They may very well be the best team in baseball right now. And the Rangers can't seem to beat the Astros. And when it's competitive, it's going to be great rivalry. It's driving distance. When the Astros play up here, you get a lot of Houston fans. When the Rangers play down there, you get a lot of Ranger fans down there. It could percolate into a pretty good rivalry if the Rangers can figure out their pitching.
Goose, we're getting into football, and I'll get to the on the field and the Ravens and the Cowboys and all that stuff, but we're a couple weeks out on the Hall of Fame. You were at the Talk of Fame Network, and sort of famously with Clark, as well as Ron Borges, NFL and Pro Football Hall of Fame voters for the class in Canton, and you've been very, very involved in this for a lot of your adult life, quite frankly. This is another class in a new year. Some thoughts about going out to Canton and doing this again, because I think in the modern era, all of the voters get a lot of gump, right, out on the internet, and I've said often it would be an incredible honor to be Baltimore's voter, and I think I'm qualified to be that guy, and maybe one day I would be, but it would be a gargantuan task, right? I mean, I have a lot of respect for what all of you try to put into making this thing happen, and it really does happen on a very sweaty weekend in Northern Ohio. We're a couple weeks out on that.
You can't win. No matter who you put in, it's the wrong five. Everybody, I'm on the senior committee as well, and there are 26 established franchises. Every one of them thinks they have 2 or 3 or 4 players that have been unfairly overlooked in the process. And that's a pool of probably 65 to 80 players. All of them deserve to be discussed, and very few of them will ever get into the room. And now there's a big thing about Terrell Owens. Why we're snubbing Terrell Owens? We're not snubbing Terrell Owens. It's a process of cuts. We're not voting yes or no on 15 guys. It's a cut process. And the guys that went in ahead of him, I'm Morton Anderson. People want to say, well, how can you put in Morton Anderson over Terrell Owens? Morton Anderson is the game's all-time leading scorer. No one has scored more points than this guy in the history of the game. He probably should have been on 2 or 3 years ago, but he had to wait his turn. And I think that's going to be the case with Terrell Owens. He's going to have to wait his turn. Right now, the numbers haven't stacked up in his favor, but I think most people believe he'll get in, but it's not his turn yet.
Jerry Jones, I mean, you're in that market. Has it ever occurred to you what the Cowboys would have been if, Joe Jablonski would have bought the team instead of, if it would have just been somebody else? If it would have been Dan Snyder, let's say, or someone like him, or like a Peter Angelos or a Jeff Luria. I think it's very easy on the outside to look at Jerry and Jerry's world and the larger in life, and obviously he's recreated the entire AFC West at this point, as well as the state of California and Nevada for football. So, from that perspective, I see it. I'm an Art Modell guy. And I'm not going to, take you to, pin you to the wall on that. As you've just pointed out, you get pinned by 80 other people and 80 other candidacies. But the Jerry Jones thing, I think for some fans, they look at that and say, well, why now? Why here? Why now with him? Is it a little early for him? Isn't he still in the middle of writing this story?
He's in his 70s.
I understand that.
Well, he changed the reason he's in. He changed the financial dynamic of the league. He was the guy that stood up and said, when Modell and Tegel pitched the financial give back to networks, he said no. He got Fox Network involved. And since Fox got involved, the TV numbers have exploded. He's the guy that showed the NFL how to make money in their stadiums. And that triggered a explosion of new stadiums. Back when he bought the team, he was one of 3 owners that held the lease on his own stadium. All the money he could make up stadium was his. He wasn't leasing the place. So now all these new stadiums were built. The owners had to get the leases so they could make the kind of money he's making. And that's why the Cowboys now have passed all the European soccer teams, the most valuable sporting franchise in the world. He changed the whole financial dynamic of football. And the revenue he generated is the reason that salary cap has gone from $34 million in 1993 to $155 million in 2017. He's put a lot of money in a lot of pockets, and a lot of people think he's made the game better.
In the case for him in coming in, they hated him in the beginning, right?
Yeah, because they lost. And you talk about how would this franchise have been had not Jerry bought this team, had somebody else. Well, first off, the new owner wouldn't have brought Jimmy Johnson in. He brought in Jimmy Johnson because Jimmy Johnson was a college buddy of his. And Jimmy Johnson is the guy that turned this thing around. He's the guy that cut the Herschel Walker deal. He's the guy, the fastest turnaround in history from worst to Super Bowl champion in 4 years. They became the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. Without Jimmy Johnson, that doesn't happen. And if they're not winning Super Bowls early on in Jerry's tenure, this franchise is kind of muddling along with everybody else behind the Patriots.
For all the angst and all the years, and you were one of the first people to really get involved in doing mock drafts and all of that stuff, and you're sort of feted for that, and you've been on this Hall of Fame committee forever, and every year you sort of, you're wrangling about it, having guys like me giving you a hard time about Art Modell. What do you love about it? What do you love when you go to Canton at this point? I mean, I would think part of the good news for you is you know so many of these people. One of the neat parts is when all of the living Hall of Famers put their jackets on and all gather. There really is something special if you love football, and you've loved football as long as we've loved football about seeing it. But there's got to be a great sense of pride for you having been in the middle of all of this, right?
Yeah, I think because in a lot of cases you're changing people's lives. And what I really like about it is being on the senior committee and getting a guy who waited 50 years like Jack Butler, getting him enshrined in Canton, getting a Mick Tingeloff who waited 32 years, Dick LeBeau who waited 34 years, guys who'd never been discussed, never been candidates, and all of a sudden they get their busts and the gold jackets as Hall of Famers. And you see the appreciation in their eyes and what it means to their families. I mean, it's a special moment. I try to get back to Canton every year because seeing the families, seeing the sheer joy of a candidacy, of a enshrinement, that's where you get you take all the grief for 362 or 3 days out of the year for that one weekend.
Well, we're going to have a little something going on here, and I will be seeing you in Minnesota, I'm sure, at the Super Bowl, and that week will be the week that Ray Lewis is up, right? And we'll be talking a lot about this, I'm sure, during the season, but come next January into February and come this time next year, a lot of Ravens fans have been hitting me about buses and what time does the bus leave for Canton in 2018 for Ray Lewis. Is there any way at all he doesn't get in February in your mind?
No, I think he's probably the leader in the clubhouse.
He's safe.
Candidates for that class. Yeah, I would say he's got a pretty safe candidacy. Yeah, I think you can probably line up the buses.
Well, I mean, but you may have said the same thing about Owens, and Randy Moss is also. Is he sort of rubber stamped as well?
Randy Moss, I don't know. I think Randy's got some of the same problems as Terrell Owens. I'd be surprised. Brian Urlacher is a first-time candidate as well. He was an all-decade linebacker as well. Can you put 2 middle linebackers in? Can you have Moss jump Owens? That's part of the problem with this process. We got to hash our way through this and come up with the 5 right names. But I do think you can probably pencil in Lewis. I think he's the leader in the clubhouse for the class of 2018.
Goose, if I make you God tomorrow morning and you get one wild card to put in the Hall of Fame who's not in the Hall of Fame, what's the thing that's pissing you off right now? Who's not in that should be in, other than Art Modell?
The Jerry Kramer thing is troublesome. I mean, he's picked as the best guard in the first 50 years of the NFL. He's on the all-decade team from the 1960s. He wins 5 championships. He was the leading scorer on 2 of those teams because he also kicked. And he's been in the room 10 times. He's never gotten in. It puzzles me why Jerry Kramer doesn't already have a bust in Canton. And I think that's the one I hear most about. Why isn't Jerry Kramer? He's picked as the best guard in the first 50 years of football. How do you keep this guy out? And I don't have an answer because by and large, his window of opportunity came before I got on the committee. So I don't have an answer, and it puzzles me. At some point, I'm sure we'll probably bring him out as a senior again, but I think the guy should have been in probably 20 years ago.
Goose, you've been around it all down there in Dallas, and Jerry and pre-Jerry and all that stuff. This is a year of incredible expectation for them, right? I mean, they've got their quarterback. The Romo thing. They figured out a way to ease that and make that sort of go away. And I'm kind of shocked he's broadcasting and not playing football in Houston or Denver. I'll get your thoughts on that as well. But for the Cowboys, this is a year of huge expectation, maybe more so than at any time in recent memory.
Well, last year was completely out of the blue. They went from worst to first, and now, the sky's the limit. But this is a flawed team. They Last year, they won the 13 games playing a last-place schedule. They got to play the Tampas and Chicagos. This year, they're playing a first-place schedule. They got Atlanta and Green Bay, and they got a much tougher schedule. I think they can win 11 games, win the division, and be a better team than they were last year. They had all kinds of defensive deficiencies. And, in fact, there are 9 starters gone from the group that started the last playoff game in January. They got a lot of holes to fill, a lot of question marks. So there are questions, but everybody wants to hang their hats on Des Bryant and Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, thinking that offense is going to carry them. And it should. They should win 11 games. They very well could win the division. But I don't see this team being a 13-win team like it was last year, not with the schedule.
He is Rick Gosselin, Hall of Fame voter, radio host of the Talk of Fame Network, heard here on WNST every Sunday right around lunchtime. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Rick Gosselin and the number 9, as well as at the Dallas Morning News, where he is the longtime NFL writer and columnist as well. Goose, give a little plug for Talk of Fame Network and what you guys have done there with Clark and also with Ron Borges up in Boston. You guys put this thing together. We run it, and I get a lot of feedback on Sundays. People drive around and say, hey, who are these guys? And then they tune in. They're like, hey, man, you guys get some great guests on that show.
Yeah, it's been a labor of love. We sat there in Canton many years ago, wonder if we could do a Hall of Fame concept show, and we pulled it off. We've been up and running now 3 years. We've got the best guest list in radio. Our last show, right now, this is the last week of our 3-week best of shows. But in our last show, we had Aaron Rodgers on. He talked about the Hail Marys. We also had Joe Schmidt on, who was a 50th anniversary middle linebacker for the Detroit Lions. We talk about Hall of Famers past, present, and future, Hall of Fame moments, Hall of Fame games, just all things that are great. And Roethlisberger on. We've had Joe Flacco on. We've had Don Shula's been on. Bill Parcells has been on. Everybody who is anybody in football, Brett Favre, they've all been on our show. And they love talking football with us because we are there to talk about football and great moments in football.
Sorry you didn't get in for the Rangers-Orioles series, Goose, but hope to see you further on up the road, and we'll see you in Canton, Ohio in a couple weeks as well. Always a pleasure to have you on. Appreciate all you guys do down at Talk of Fame Network as well.
Thanks, Nestor. My privilege.
You got it. Rick Gosselin. You can follow him at Rick Gosselin 9. That's Gosselin. One of the guys who did the first mock drafts many, many years ago at the Dallas Morning News, now at talkoffamenetwork.com, and heard here each and every Sunday. Also covers the Texas Rangers, of course, down there, and the Rangers in town this week. The Astros coming in this week. And Luke will be at the ballpark, and then Luke will be in Owings Mills beginning next week. If there is any breaking news on trade, you'll get it first on our WNST tech service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.